Welcome everybody to another edition of the Michael Costa Show. Today will be a special edition. It's going to be exposing the media bias. So that's what I will be trying to do today in today's episode. I have a few things to show you, so let's get right into it. First of all, we'll start off with a journalist named Drew Holden that has worked for New York Times, Washington Post. He's a freelance commentary writer right now, and he posted this thread on Twitter that I thought was really interesting. And I knew for a while, and I've seen for a while, how the media bias in its effect at work, basically, and it's been a while, but not only recently have people started, the mainstream people starting to realize how biased they are. Now I want to make some things clear. That when people say fake news, it doesn't always mean fake news, like literally fake news. It could mean it's misleading. It could mean it's taking something out of context. Doesn't have to literally mean it was fake. I don't know if you guys are following me here. So when somebody says it's fake news, it's just maybe they're misleading, or sometimes it actually does happen that it's completely false. And they'll do a retraction or a correction months later, like it was the case for the bounties, the Russia putting bounties on American soldiers' heads. That during the election campaign, that was a story posted by the Washington Post, and it was retaken by almost all mainstream media outlets. And then quietly, a few months later, in the last 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, Washington Post quietly puts a retraction and correction. Meanwhile, the tweet that originally posted the article, that one was never taken out. It was retweeted thousands of times, and they only put a little correction in the article itself, saying that no, the intel was wrong, and that there never was a bounty on American soldiers' head put on by Russia. They literally interfered in an election. Just like the Hunter Biden story, that Twitter and Facebook, and they banned from the New York Post, one of the oldest newspapers in America, from posting. Companies refused to report on this story, even going as far as lying and saying it was Russian disinformation. And then Biden gets elected, and quietly, they start coming out with the story. Oh, but the Hunter Biden story, the laptop, it was real. Oh, we're sorry, we made a mistake. Our journalists have worked hard and have found that it was real. Oh, fuck you. Bullshit. That's what it is. Corporate media is just what it is. Corporate media, agenda-driven corporate media. It's exactly what it is. But, okay, so let me talk to you about this thread by Drew Holden. Today, President Biden, this was done April 14th, so 7 days ago, exactly a week ago. Today, President Biden announced his intentions to end the war in Afghanistan, to great media fanfare. You may remember way back in 2019 and 2020, President Trump said the same thing. Let me know if you can spot the difference in coverage then versus now. So, before I continue, I just want to say another thing about this. So Trump had announced in 2019 and in 2020, had announced that May 1st, he was going to take out all the troops out of Afghanistan. He's going to bring back the troops home. May 1st, which is in 10 days. Wow, the media went crazy. Oh no, it's dangerous. You're putting our soldiers' lives in danger. Oh my God. Will it even be possible to do this? Oh no, no, no. The world's gonna end. Oh my God. The media went totally ballistic. Now Biden announces that he's delaying bringing the troops home from May 1st to September 1st, September 11th. What does the media do? Oh, great man, he's bringing our troops home. And then buried somewhere in the article, it actually says the truth, that he's delaying bringing the troops home from May 1st to September 11th. So that's what? June, July, August, September, 4 months that he's delaying putting troops in harm's way. And by the way, the Taliban have said that by May 1st, the troops are not gone like the agreement that they agreed to with the previous administration. That there was going to be a price to pay with blood. So I don't have to draw you a picture of how that's going to end, right? But yet the media painted as like, oh, Biden is bringing our troops home. What a great president. The media bias is really getting me nervous. But what gets me even more nervous is that people actually blindly follow these things. I don't know if it's being naive or if it's confirmation bias that they have, that's what they want to. They have a bias towards that, so they look for things that will confirm that bias, right? But I digress. So let me read that again, the opening tweet. Today, President Biden announced his intention to end the war in Afghanistan to great media fanfare. You may remember way back in 2019 and 2020, President Trump said the same thing. Let me know if you can spot the difference in coverage then versus now. So when Trump said we were leaving, CNN quoted the NATO Secretary General with a stark warning about how dangerous the move would be. But Biden's decision, well, on that one, we just get to hear from his people. So, compare on the left, the reporting for when Trump announced they were bringing the troops home as of May 1st, compared to the reporting when Biden announced he was delaying bringing them home by 4 months. So NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg issued a stark warning that any premature withdrawal from Afghanistan could be dangerous. A day after reports that President Trump is eyeing a troop drawdown against the advice of the nation's top military officials. And when Biden announces the same thing, as President Biden prepares to lay out his plan to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan, a source familiar with his thinking, I love that when they use a source familiar with his thinking. When they say that, because it's not even a source that was there that heard something. No, it's a source familiar with his thinking. They used to do that a lot with Trump. That means it's fabricated from A to Z, in my opinion. Tell CNN reporter Amapur that he thinks no amount of U.S. troops in the country can be a game changer anymore, right? So one of the things I've discussed before is how outlets can frame the narrative they want by focusing on people who support or oppose a certain policy. It's misleading, but also a calling card of CNN. So here on the left, this is just reckless, and it is really risky, says Brent Brune of Trump's plan to withdraw troops from Afghanistan and Iraq. You're not sharing information with the incoming administration, so the likelihood that something could go wrong is very, very high. And when Biden announced the same thing, former President Obama praised President Biden's bold leadership for his decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan by September 11th, saying that it is time to recognize that we have accomplished all that we can militarily in America's longest war. Do you see the difference now? You're starting to see the game they're playing, right? Starting to see it on the left when Trump announced it. Diplomats worry Trump's desire to withdraw U.S. troops risks success of Afghan Taliban talks. When Biden announced it, when actually the Taliban actually made threats towards the Biden administration after they delayed the withdrawal, well, this is how CNN reported it. President Biden has announced his decision to withdraw American troops from Afghanistan before September 11th, the 20th anniversary of the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon that led the U.S. into its longest war. So you see how they frame it, right? Once upon a time, New York Times told us that Trump's decision was a capitulation to the Taliban where we would get nothing in return, as if blood not shed and treasure not spent means nothing. But Biden's call? Well, for some reason, these concerns seems to have evaporated. On the left, when Trump announced it, this is how the New York Times reported it. News analysis. The Taliban wanted the U.S. to leave Afghanistan. Turkey wanted the U.S. out of Syria, and North Korea wanted them to stop military exercises with South Korea. Trump has now, to some extent, obliged all three, but without getting much in return. Bullshit. Peace is what they got in return. The Abraham Accords is what they got in return. Peace in North Korea is what they got in return. You see how they frame these things? The New York Times on the right, when Biden announced it. We went to Afghanistan because of a horrific attack that happened 20 years ago, President Biden said, announcing a full withdrawal from the country. That cannot explain why we should remain there in 2021. So you're starting to see how they report towards one president, towards another. For Trump, we hear about the fears of Afghan officials from New York Times. Biden, on the other hand, gets a sympathetic write-up despite being the second most powerful man in the country during the height of the U.S. forces, meaning being vice president to President Barack Obama. Just incredible memory holding here. So on the left, when Trump announced it, President Trump ordered a reduction down to 2,500 U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Afghan officials fear the cuts, which will happen before President-elect Joe Biden takes office, will encourage the Taliban to keep fighting. Right? Here, I'll click on this one so you can see better. When Biden announced it, I'm the first president in 40 years. Who knows what it means to have a child serving in a war zone? President Biden said on Wednesday, you know, the thing, referring to his son Beau, who was deployed to Iraq. It's time for America's troops to come home. You know, because the thing, please guys, bring them home. It's my shitty imitation of Biden. So now you're starting to see it. Now let's go to Time Magazine. This one is from Time Magazine. Might be the most egregious of them all. I mean, come on. So on the left, when Donald Trump announced the withdrawal, can Donald Trump accept a defeat in Afghanistan? A few months later, when Biden delayed the withdrawal, Biden's move brings to an end America's longest war. A long, simmering conflict that meant solemn sacrifice for military families and changed so much of day-to-day life for all Americans, even if they don't immediately realize it, writes Philip Elliott for Time Magazine. Come on. Like, what in the hell is that? Also, what even is this time? The journalist Drew Holden says. Trevor Noah says Donald Trump's Afghanistan war strategy is like his position on Nazis. It's unclear. His position was bring back the troops home. No wars. Negotiate. That's what his strategy was. It's clear as water. Just like his position on Nazis. That was an account somebody actually researched and verified every single time that Donald Trump denounced white supremacists, Nazis, etc. I think the number was close to 300 times on camera that he disavowed or denounced these people. And yet the same rhetoric and the same narrative was that he never denounced or disavowed these people, when he's on camera doing it hundreds of times. See, but they keep on, if you read Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent, or even Saul Alinsky's playbook, I'm having not remembering the name of the book, but I think it's a playbook for radicals or something like that. They see that if you repeat something, you keep on repeating something through media, that eventually a big enough portion of the population will believe it. Just like the scientific experiment that I've showed you on my Facebook page a few weeks ago, about that, how, I'll give you a quick recap. Let's say 12 people, right? You get shown a sign, right, with 3 bars, and get shown another sign with 3 different bars, and they ask a question type. There's 3 signs, right? 2 are the same, so there's sign A, B, and C. 2 of them are the same, 1 of them is different, so you have to choose out the different. So 11 people go and choose the wrong one, right? The 12th person is there knowing that that's not the right one, that's different from the others. But in some cases, they still choose the one that's wrong because the other 11 people have chosen it. They don't want to be stigmatized or left alone. That's scientifically proven. So you know how they play that game. So I digress. Let me continue. Everyone has been doing this. These tweets are mere months apart from MSNBC. Stunningly, they found people to say the exact opposite things about the decision to pull out. So on the left, when Trump announced it, former Special President Envoy Brett McGurk on President Trump pulling troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan. Not only does it sabotage the Biden administration, it also puts our troops at greater risk. Warmongers. On the right, when Biden announced it, Senator Kaine says the Biden administration's plan to fully withdraw troops from Afghanistan by September 11th is the right call. See? The framing. So you start to understand why people call these outlets fake news. Not because they're literally fake, but because of framing, because of confirmation bias, because of misleading, because of taking things out of context. That's why they're fake news. So much of today's coverage reads as if nothing had ever been said to the contrary by anyone on MSNBC. Mayor Buttigieg, who served in Afghanistan, says Trump makes foreign policy decisions impulsively, erratically, emotionally. It's the biggest bunch of BS I've heard. On the right, when Biden announced it, President Biden is expected to say that the U.S. cannot continue the cycle of extending or expanding our military presence in Afghanistan, hoping to create the ideal conditions for a withdrawal, expecting a different result. MSNBC boys and girls. Don't want to assume your gender. It's interesting that Maddow no longer seems to see the invisible hand of Russia calling the shots now that it's Biden pulling troops out of Afghanistan. Instead, It's a great thing. So on the left, Maddow, host on MSNBC. Within hours of Vladimir Putin's pivot to mention the U.S. presence in Afghanistan, the Wall Street Journal had news of Donald Trump ordering a reduction in U.S. troops in Afghanistan. And when Biden announces the same thing, or actually worse, a delay, ending the longest war, Biden to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. We will leave, Biden said last month. The question is when we leave. Today, that question has been answered. The big savior that is Joe Biden can't finish a damn sentence without, saying the thing, Moving on. Washington Post presented without introduction. On the left, when Trump announced it. Trump administration to cut troop levels in Afghanistan despite Pentagon warning. With the article headlined, Trump administration to cut troops levels in Afghanistan and Iraq in spirit to deliver on promise to withdraw troops from the Middle East. On the right, when Biden announced it. America's longest war may be soon be coming to an end. President Biden is announcing that all troops will be leaving Afghanistan by the 20th anniversary of the September 11, 2001 attacks. So you're starting to see how they frame these things. The reporting, how different it is when one president announces one thing and when another president announces the same thing. Or even worse, delays it. Some places, like the National Public Radio, the NPR, don't even seem to be trying at this rate. Where no military leaders worried when Biden made the decision to do the same thing. On the left, when Trump announced it. The Trump administration says it will pull thousands of troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan by January 15th. And aims to have the remaining forces out by spring 2021, which was the May 1st deadline. A drawdown that has military leaders worried. How can he do this? He's putting our troops at risk. On the right, when Biden announced it. President Biden plans to withdraw all remaining U.S. troops from Afghanistan by September 11th, the 20th anniversary of the terrorist attacks, a senior administration official says. Bit different, huh? For PBS NewsHour, Trump's decision were instantly refracted through the lens of those who oppose him. For Biden, we just hear from him directly on the benefits of his plan. So on the left, PBS, when Trump announced it. Pure politics so he can brag. That's how New York Times David Brooks explains President Trump's Afghanistan strategy. Pure politics so he can brag. And what did they do when Biden announced it? They literally let him brag. Watch, during speech announcing his plan to withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan, President Biden says the September 11th terror attacks cannot explain why American forces should still be there 20 years later. Folks, it's the thing. That's why. We got to bring these troops home. Because the thing that happened 20 years ago. In New York. Might be mistaken. Could be New Jersey. The thing. When it was Trump making the decisions, ABC rushed to tell us about how the decision would undermine the administration's agreement with the Taliban. It didn't. And now that Biden is calling the shots, we've got nothing but pomp, circumstance, and PR pull quotes. So ABC News on the left when Trump announced it. President Trump said it's time for all U.S. service members to exit Afghanistan, undermining his administration's agreement with the Taliban, making it dangerous. On the right, when Biden delayed it, actually putting troops in danger from the Taliban. I've conducted that it's time to end America's longest war. President Joe Biden announces that all American troops will withdraw from Afghanistan by the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, saying it's time for American troops to come home. If it's time for American troops to come home, why aren't you letting them come home when it was announced before, on May 1st, 4 months earlier? If it really is time to come home, then you should let them come home when the previous administration had promised them they would come home. Not leaving them in danger 4 more months. Basically breaking an agreement that they had negotiated with the Taliban. I've got a separate thread on this, but let this be your reminder that there isn't any evidence of the existence of the Russian bounty stories, and yet it also found its way into ABC's coverage for Trump. New York Times too. U.S. tries to push forward Taliban deal amid bounty reports. Trump's moves to withdraw from Afghanistan. That was from ABC News. From New York Times, bounty's uproar casts a shadow over the rare Trump foreign policy achievement. So you get what they're doing, the framing here, right? For example, in this New York Times edition, where it says, bounty's uproar casts a shadow over a rare Trump foreign policy achievement. So they tell you literally what they're doing. So they threw 2 completely different stories. The fake bounty story, with the Trump announcing that he's withdrawing troops from Afghanistan as May 1st. So they throw the bounty onto that story to cast a shadow over the rare Trump foreign policy achievement. And then a few months later, announced that the bounty story was all fake. So all this was just to make Trump look bad on a day that he was announcing he was bringing back the troops home. So I hope you're starting to see the role the media plays. Right now, they're basically just the propaganda arm of the Democratic National Council, or the Democratic Party, if you will. So I won't even get into. Now, at this point, Drew Holden, the journalist, posts his tweet, his thread on the bounty story and how it was all a lie all along. But you could get into that if you want. Excuse me. I'll just continue with the framing of this announcement. So, and Jennifer Rubin is so close to getting it. On the left, Jennifer Rubin, she writes for the Washington Post. More to the point, why is Trump handing out chunks of the world, Syria, Afghanistan, the Sea of Azov, to America's greatest international foe? Where does it stop? The Baltics? Berlin? So this is how she framed Trump announcing he's bringing the troops home May 1st, 2021. Now, let's see how she frames it when Biden announces he's bringing them home 4 months later. My child born in 2001 has never experienced a world in which we were not at war in Afghanistan. It's deeply sobering. I've got to hand it to them, though. He may be wrong, but Max Boot is consistent in his urging that America be invested in building democracy, or what have you, despite the overwhelming evidence opposing the wisdom of doing so. Max Booth. On the left, when Trump announced it. Trump is not ending the war in Afghanistan, but he is ending America's involvement and thereby making more likely a victory for terrorists who slaughter mothers and babies. Ugh. Orange man bad. Max Boot when Biden announced it. The U.S. is abandoning all the girls going to school, all the women in the workforce, all the brave soldiers fighting the Taliban, all the young entrepreneurs starting businesses, all the government officials trying to build a fragile democracy. Well, I gotta give him credit, like Drew says there. At least he's consistent. in his fear-mongering. This situation has given us one of the clearest examples of framing for materially similar actions by different presidents. Would anyone look at these side-by-sides and think they were impartial and balanced? Asking the question is answering it. It should go without saying, but this is really, really bad. The narrative shift is striking, even though the goal of each policy is the same. It isn't sustainable to have information twisted and crammed into narratives this way. I don't have anything to sell or subscribe to, but if you can, homeless shelters are still in dire need following the pandemic and need your help. For those in DC, Capital Area Food Bank is a great option. So this was the thread where Drew did an amazing job of showing you how the media frames an announcement, a similar announcement from one president to another, depending on if he's a Democrat president or if he's a Republican president. So now you've seen from all traditional media outlets how they do this, right? So now let me get into another story. Y'all remember, right? January 6th, I'm sure you've all heard about that, where Trump organized a rally down the street from the Capitol on the day that they were voting to basically condemn or impeach the president. It was about the election, not really about what the president said, because that will come later. But it was about the election. It was a vote on certifying the election, right? So Trump had organized a rally down the street from the Capitol. And at the end of his rally, he clearly says, for anybody that's willing to listen to what he's saying, I want you guys to march peacefully. I'm paraphrasing here, it's not the exact quote. But he does say peacefully. I want you guys to march peacefully. Don't fall into these people's game. Do it peacefully. Show them your miscontent, but do it peacefully, right? Well, the media and the politicians on the left right away started saying inciting violence. He incited an insurrection. Incited violence. My God. Got to lynch him. Impeach him. When he clearly never incited no violence at all. He actually literally told them to march peacefully and do so peacefully to the Capitol to show their miscontent, but don't fall into their games and do it peacefully. And yet they still said he incited violence and an insurrection at the Capitol. It was just pretext to start banning and investigating and locking up basically conservatives and anybody that ever even questioned the election. Well, now I will show you Miss Maxine Waters. Okay, Miss Maxine Waters from California. She's a congresswoman from California that that crosses state lines and that literally incites violence. Now listen to what she says, and I'll put context around what she says.
Reform. And so, yes, I would like to see the bill in Congress pass on police reform, but I know that the right wing, the racists, are opposed to it, and I don't know what's going to happen to it. But I know this: we've got to stay in the street, and we've got to demand justice.
As a black man, despite all of the efforts, I feel like nothing changes. And George Floyd is waking so many people up, yet nothing has happened. Despite the rhetoric, like what needs to happen that's different this year than all the years before?
We're looking for a guilty verdict. We're looking for a guilty verdict and we're looking to see if all of the talk that took place and has been taking place after they saw what happened to George Floyd, if nothing does not happen, then we know that we've got to not only stay in the street, but we've got to fight for justice. But I am very hopeful, and I hope that we're going to get a verdict that will say guilty, guilty, guilty. And if we don't, we cannot go away.
And not just manslaughter, right? I mean...
Oh, no, not manslaughter. No. This is guilty for murder. I don't know whether it's in the first degree, but as far as I'm concerned, it's first degree murder.
Congresswoman, what happens if we don't
First degree.
get what you just told? What should the people do? What should protesters on the street do?
I didn't hear you.
What happens?
What should protesters do?
Well, we got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
Okay, so let's break this all down, right? So she crosses state lines to literally intimidate the jury that if they don't convict guilty on all charges, that they will get, the protesters should remain in the streets and get more confrontational than they already have been. They've been burning courthouses, burning businesses. What does she mean by more confrontational? Basically by starting shooting at the cops. That's basically what she's saying. Literally inciting insurrection. She even mentions when the guy says, hey, and not manslaughter. She even says, no, manslaughter. We want guilty of murder and first degree murder. He's not even charged. He wasn't even charged with first degree murder. It was second degree murder, third degree murder, and second degree manslaughter. He was found guilty on all charges. Justice was served. And yet, she wants a first degree murder, unless there's first degree murder charged with, it's not even a guilty conviction, which is not even possible because it's not even charged with first degree murder. She's telling the protesters to be more active and more confrontational than they already have been. What could be more confrontational than burning city buildings, putting police stations on fire, burning courthouses with people inside? I'll tell you what could be more confrontational. The National Guard, merely a few hours after Maxine Waters incited an insurrection. What happened? Well, the Minnesota National Guard and Minneapolis PD neighborhood security team was fired upon early Sunday morning in a drive-by shooting near Penn Avenue and Broadway in Minneapolis. The shooting occurred on or about 4:19 a.m. as a light-colored SUV fired several shots at a Minnesota OSN security team, National Guard, providing neighborhood security. No team members were seriously injured, thank God. 2 Minnesota National Guard members did sustain minor injuries from the incident. One guardsman sustained an injury from shattered glass requiring additional care and was taken to local hospital to receive treatment. The other guardsman received only superficial injuries. I am relieved to know none of our guardsmen were seriously injured, said Major General Sean Mankey, the Adjutant General of the Minnesota National Guard. This event highlights the volatility and tension in our communities right now. I ask for peace as we work through this difficult time. So you have Maxine Waters, Congresswoman from California, literally inciting a violent insurrection and telling protesters to get more confrontational. A few hours later, drive-by shooting on the Minnesota National Guard. They're literally attacking cops and soldiers. And that's not an insurrection? You saw how the media and these left-wing politicians jumped on Trump for saying for people to peacefully march to the Capitol and show the politicians your miscontent, but do it peacefully, so not to fall into their game. That was inciting an insurrection. But Maxine Waters telling protesters to be more confrontational than they have already been, unless the man is charged or convicted, of a crime he's not even charged with, and that's not inciting insurrection. Please. And don't come and tell me there's no conspiracy about the media. You obviously don't follow shit. I'm saying people that say that there's no conspiracy in the media. Media definitely conspire with each other. They frame things, they frame stories to their benefit, to their narrative that serve their agenda. They'll report on something with lack of context to make it look a certain way. They'll mislead you in the way they're reporting that story. Or they'll put it that it's coming from an anonymous source familiar with that person's thinking. So you know how far-fetched. When they start far-fetching it like that, to me, that's a blatant lie. If you're going that far as an anonymous source familiar with the person's thinking, so why does it have to be anonymous if he's not leaking anything? It's because it's bullshit. They're clearly, at some moments, just invent things just to push their agenda and their narrative. I've shown you the proof. It's time you look for it for yourself. I've shown you the tools for you to see it for yourself. Now it's up to you to notice it when it's shown to you, share it, expose it. We need as many people as possible to start seeing the lies that the media are putting out. It's very important in moving forward. Because in this case, it's about politics. But they do the same thing about these dangerous critical theories that they're teaching our kids in elementary, in K-12, kindergarten to high school. It's very dangerous. And they're framing it the same way. So it's time for you to use these tools to notice when they're using these tactics, expose it, share it to people, to as many people as possible. We need as many people as possible to start realizing how the media work. All right, guys, that was my video for today. Thanks for tuning in for another edition of the Michael Costa Show. Hope to see you soon. Peace out.